it's hard to recognize is because narcissism is a spectrum. So it doesn't look the same in every environment, although they do seem to share the same playbook because a lot of them use these similar tactics and tendencies. And, you know, especially in the beginning of any narcissistic relationship, if it's a romantic relationship or a work relationship, they put on their best selves. It's often
Yeah.
referred to as the mask. So you see all these wonderful things about them, right? And, you're drawn in.
Welcome to the Becoming Sound podcast, where we dive into the tough stuff and try to find the humor in the hot mess of being an adult child. Join me as we peel back the layers on growing up in dysfunction, navigating substance abuse, mental health challenges, and everything in between.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining me on the Becoming Sound podcast. I'm Krista Zaft, your host. And if you're new here, thank you for joining me. I'm grateful that you showed up today. I have a wonderful guest on the show. Her name is Chris Wasko, and she is an energy healer, a spiritual counselor, and psychic medium, dedicated to guiding individuals through their personal healing growth journeys. Specializing in trauma recovery, Chris helps old souls and survivors of narcissistic abuse heal not only on an emotional and a spiritual level, but also on a nervous system level by uncovering deep soul lessons, balancing energy, and restoring nervous system regulation. She supports her clients in navigating life's challenges and reclaiming their true potential. So let's dive into it with Chris. Welcome, Chris. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me, Krista.
You're welcome. So tell me a little bit about your story, about how your childhood has impacted your adulthood and what led you to the work that you do.
Well, my childhood, to start with, was extremely volatile, and it's all I knew. And so it was my normal. And it took me a very long time to recognize that I had two severely narcissistic parents, but both on different sides of the spectrum. And growing up, I was often the scapegoat and made to feel like I was the problem. And it was challenging. And, when you're younger as a child, you don't look at your parents as doing anything wrong. If they tell you you do something wrong, you take that in. So I took a lot of that in, and a lot of self-hatred is pretty much what I was growing up with. And, as far as the evolution of this, I started to recognize as I got older and I had my own children, the narcissistic patterns in myself. Because when you're raised in that kind of environment, you are going to pick up tendencies. Even if you swear to yourself, I am not going to be like my parent. And in some ways you will break a cycle, but to really break the cycle, you have to have the ability to be self-reflective, to look at yourself, to see the elements of yourself that are toxic and what you can change, right? So I started seeing these things in my parenting, right? Where I would hear my parents' words come out of my mouth. And it would just give me this rigid feel. Because for me, I swore I wouldn't hit my children because I was hit so much that was a very strong boundary for myself as a parent. But that's what happens. We get tunnel vision as parents. We say, okay, I'm not going to do exactly what my parents did. And this is what I'm going to make sure I don't do. And you'll probably focus on that so much that you don't see the other things that are toxic. So those were the unfolding elements for me, and they were certainly in bits and pieces, definitely not all at once. And I would say the most dramatic shift happened when I ultimately cut my parents off. And my reason for doing this, it was there was more of a violence aspect. When my oldest was 2, my father hit him, which I'm still working to forgive myself on. And at that time, I actually did forgive my father. He was apologetic for the first time in his life. And I felt we might be able to work past that. And it was another 8 years that my father then threatened to hit my husband. And I said, that's it, I'm done. So I cut them off. When you have parents like I do, your nervous system is hardwired to trauma. So my first response after cutting them off was fear that what are they going to do to me? How are they going to try and hurt me? because I have an extremely vindictive mother. So I was just waiting of what she might do to try and punish me. And so I went to therapy, and that was a very helpful first step of just unpacking and being validated for the things I experienced, helping me see things in a different light, helping me with my own parenting. And in this time, I started healing my nervous system predominantly. I was calmer. I was more peaceful. I wasn't looking around the corner for the boogeyman. And I was a better wife. I was a better mother. I just felt just so much better on so many levels. And other things started changing. I was changing my diet. I healed my thyroid. I had had an autoimmune disease of my thyroid that I no longer have, all because of all these different steps I was taking to heal. And that ultimately led me to the surprise of my life that I could see people in spirit with my mind's eye. So that was probably the most shocking element of healing. And if you would have told me that would have happened, I probably would be the one to believe it the least because I have a business background. This was not what I was expecting. So that was really to sum up the unfolding. There's a lot of elements to it, but that's kind of what's led me to where I'm at today.
Yeah, it's really complex. And narcissism is, I mean, kids don't understand. You just really believe what you're being told. I did not grow up with narcissist parents. There was trauma, there was other things, but that wasn't one of them. Can you explain a little bit about what that looks like? Because it sometimes is a really hidden thing. And I have people in my life today who have dealt with this in relationships and don't see the signs. They don't see the behavior and the signals for what they are. And when you're a kid, of course, you're not going to see that. What are some of the ways that this shows up so people can recognize it?
Well, a lot of why it's hard to recognize is because narcissism is a spectrum. So it doesn't look the same in every environment, although they do seem to share the same playbook because a lot of them use these similar tactics and tendencies. And, especially in the beginning of any narcissistic relationship, if it's a romantic relationship or a work relationship, they put on their best selves. It's often referred to as the mask. So you see all these wonderful things about them, right? And, you're drawn in. They're very charismatic usually. And there's something appealing, but there's also something about you that's appealing to them, especially if you're a loving, empathetic person, which they tend to target because that is an ideal narcissistic supply. That's someone to be controlled. Now, that might not be their motivation because really what it is there's something within them that's missing and they're seeking it out elsewhere because narcissism is a generational pattern. So these abandoned parts of them that they're seeking in others were abandoned in their own childhoods or teenage years, usually both. So really it's recognizing those little hints in the beginning because anyone that I've worked with that has dealt with a narcissist, they always look back and recognize the, maybe not red flags, but certainly orange flags that were like, huh. And then later they realize I should have noticed. And I don't think anyone should ever beat themselves up about that because it is a process and because there are so many elements to them that are good and they are very convincing. So I have a very good friend who tried very hard to leave her boyfriend at the time, seeing all the signs, all the patterns. And she said, and then I fell in love with him and that was it. And she's still married to him and dealing with a lot of the toxic patterns. And she sees it so clearly. So in some cases, it might be our individual journey to learn these things. But, it's really being aware of those gut instincts because they do show them. They do show these little reveals in the beginning of who they are. Let it be the manipulation. They stop talking to you. They give you the silent treatment because you upset them, or they manipulate you in seeking compliments of, they'll tell you, oh, they're no good. They're not good people, hoping that you'll basically be like, no, 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 you're wonderful, you're great, those kinds of things.
It's extremely
It's
manipulative.
extremely manipulative, but it usually comes off from this place of being wounded. So when you're a good person, you want to help somebody, right? Like, oh no, you absolutely, we love you and we want you here and I want to tell you how wonderful you are. That doesn't always look narcissistic. It looks vulnerable. So that is why it is so incredibly challenging. And, the only reason I'm an expert in this is because I was literally raised by it. And I know the ins and outs of it. And I know, my parents are on both sides of the spectrum. My dad is overt, my mother is covert, and they both will have an interwoven aspect. My dad is absolutely more violent. My mother is more manipulative, but they absolutely would change sides on that. They love to weaponize people as well. So that's why in those kinds of families, it's very common to triangulate siblings. So to speak poorly about one child to another child is a form of triangulation where you're essentially creating allies for yourself as the parent against your child. So that's often done in narcissistic relationships with friends, right? Anyone that's trying to seek out allies, that's toxic.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see how that would be missed. Wow. I mean, it's so much for children to go through. Never mind, it's so easily missed by an adult heading into that kind of relationship. How do you think that your personal experiences in this helped shape you to help other people?
I think for one, it made me incredibly strong, but it was also difficult and very lonely. And when you get to a place where you recognize it and you could help others, you're really also, I think, trying to protect people from that kind of pain, right? And, because, a healer heals themselves first, oh, I recognize these signs, I recognize these patterns. So I love to be able to give people an awareness because oftentimes in any healing journey, its first step is having the awareness. I recognize what's going on. We don't always know what to do with that, but just that aha moment is rather pivotal.
Yeah, that's huge. Once you are aware of it, things start to slowly fall into place. If you're looking, look for healers because they're usually the ones that have gone through all of the mud and they know firsthand how to, how to point this stuff out, how to suggest things, how to listen, how to really identify, I want you to talk a little bit about the loneliness. I can identify with this too. When you go through childhood trauma, when you're going into your early adulthood, it can be a very, very lonely journey and you do really feel like you're on your own. What are some of the things that are going through someone's mind who is coming into early adulthood with a lot of that baggage?
I think a lot of it is the fact that they have a dysregulated nervous system. And when you have a dysregulated nervous system, you are responding from that. And so in some cases, there are abandoned parts of you. And so you're seeking out things that you don't even know you're seeking. So it can make you feel very alone and isolated in that in itself. So you can literally have something physiological going on, but not really an awareness because it's not something you can easily diagnose. It's not easy to test medically, right? So it's really just a feeling. And then you try and chalk it up to, okay, maybe I just need to go out more, or maybe I need more self-care. And that can certainly help, but it's really working with these hardwired programs within you because the program is always something related to you not feeling worthy, you not feeling lovable, you not feeling able to do certain things because maybe you grew up with parents that told you you should be a certain way, even if it's, very well intended, someone that really encourages their child to become a doctor, for example. That child may not have wanted to be a doctor, but they feel to make their parents happy and they agreed with their parents, like, yeah, maybe I would make a good doctor, but they're lacking some part of themselves. So really it's this lack of self-knowledge. Who am I? It's very common for so many of us, especially in our 20s, to really have that question. Who am I? What am
Yeah.
I meant to do? And wanting to feel connected to some sort of purpose and feeling a little clueless about it. And this could be said for so many people. You don't necessarily have had to go through trauma to experience this, but those that have been through trauma are going to feel even more disconnected and really bounce around more in the sense of, well, I'll try this. Maybe this is who I am, and I'll try that because maybe that's who I am, because they're not healing and reprogramming those hardwired elements within their nervous system.
Yeah, so true. I can identify with that. Like the bouncing around thing, it's like you're searching for your identity in every different thing that you see, and instead of looking inward, because it's not something we're taught to do, nor even know how to do. And I see a lot of young people in that state when they do come from families like this, right? So yeah, awareness. You talked about you actually had an autoimmune, like
Yeah,
that's manifested in the body.
absolutely.
Yeah. The
A
fact
hundred
that you
percent.
can overcome and heal from that just says a lot about where we store things in our body. Do
Absolutely.
you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, yes, fully, because uh, I not only experience it in myself, I see it in many of my clients. They're not necessarily coming to me for medical reasons. I don't have a medical background. I'm always very clear on that.
Hmm.
But uh, but I do see the signs, right?
Yeah.
I recognize where, like when they say dis-ease is connected to something, a pattern in your life. So my pattern was, it's all buried in my thyroid. I had an autoimmune thyroid disorder because I had two elements of attack to my thyroid, energetically speaking. One was being criticized for being too outspoken. The other side of this was being criticized if I didn't say enough. So it was this never quite winning when it came to my voice. And
This
so,
whole,
yeah,
this whole,
all in there,
right?
right?
Yeah.
So when I hit my, it was late 20s, early 30s is when I started to have elements of feeling something's not right. And it took years for somebody to diagnose me. And
Wow.
at this time, I was having children. So a lot of it, we were chalking up to childbirth and nursing and, not sleeping because you have infants and all that stuff. So it's easy to dismiss some of these elements to just being tired, right? And
Yeah.
to just being overworked or having adrenal fatigue, which
Hmm.
I did have. I think most mothers tend to.
Yeah.
And when I finally was diagnosed, it was like somebody gave me the key to me. And I was like, thank you. So
Yeah.
in my situation though, I've become rather holistic in my life because I've had a lot of situations where the medical system has not only failed me, but nearly killed me. So
Wow.
at this point, when I was told, you'd be on a medication for life, I said, no, I'm not doing that.
Hmm.
I just decided I will find some other way. And I did. And it took time, but it was worth it to me to have that time to figure it out. Because a lot of it was figuring out what I needed to heal. They say you can't get well in the environment that made you sick. And in hindsight, I could see how cutting off my parents, that was the environment that made me sick. And now I took that away from myself, and it allowed me this ability to heal. And
Hmm.
it was a process, but oh man, I will never forget when I went to that appointment and I my doctor looked at me and he said, "You healed your thyroid." Those words still emanate to this
Yeah.
day because it just felt so powerful.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah. I always think back to the first introduction into the kind of healing world was I read Louise Hay books.
Yeah.
And
I love Louise
originally
Hay.
she was a nurse and
Mhm.
she started keeping track of all of these illnesses and how these people were feeling. Things were making sense. The correlation between certain ailments, certain diseases, certain injuries have an emotional connection. it's not just physiological. It is actually connected to your emotions and how you process your stuff. After going through a lot of stress in my own life, I had some medical stuff go on. And when my son got into recovery, about a month later, it's like all my symptoms disappeared, like they didn't exist. And so I truly, truly believe that if you want to find out what is going on with your body, start getting curious
Yes.
about your mental state, about your emotional state, all of it. So, and that speaks volumes to that for sure. So thank you for
Yeah, that's
sharing.
wonderful. Just, I love how you said, just be curious. So, yeah.
And I think that's, yeah, really powerful. Somewhere on your website, you mention a belief in life without limits. Can you explain a little bit what that means to you?
Well, I believe that we often are given limitations in life, especially our parents' limitations. And I believe when we can go beyond that, it allows us a freedom and a power within ourselves. So certain limitations can be really minor, right? Like someone telling you that, you know, maybe you should look to go into this field of work, even though you may like this, it's probably not going to work for you. That's their own limitation. That's
Yeah.
coming from what they believe in themselves, right? So I have a wonderful example of this, although again connected to trauma. But when it came to going to college, I knew what school I wanted to go to, and my dad said, "What school do you want to go to?" And I told him, and he looked at me and says, "You're too stupid to go there." That was lovely, right?
Yeah, my
And that
heart
was on the
breaks.
lighter tone for him. So, and I had a moment of boldness, and I looked at him and I said, "Watch me." And it's like a fire was lit within me.
Yeah,
And I worked very hard to get in. And I even went as far to, when I went to the school for a tour, to make an appointment with one of the guidance counselors for an interview, because this is a smaller school. They were willing to do this. And I had done that. And about 2 weeks later, our home phone rang, and my dad happened to be home and wasn't normally home at this time. So gotta love
yeah.
how the universe works, right?
Divine intervention.
Divine intervention. So my dad picked up the phone, and the man I had the interview with at the school was on the phone. And I went to the kitchen and I picked up the phone with my dad standing right there. And the man told me, he says, "I don't normally do this. I was so impressed by you, and I just want to extend our acceptance over the phone, and we would love to have you." And I looked right at my dad and I said, "I was accepted." And he was, of course, very happy, and doesn't remember saying I was too stupid to get in. So he gaslit me on that. And, but it's okay. It was my journey. But if you think of that though, too, that became part of my programming. My dad telling me something negative and me be like, "Well, I'll do this." So that can program someone, hardwire them to need someone to say they can't do something to
Yeah.
fight past it. So that's again, this embedded limitation. So getting past that is rewriting that program. And that
Yeah.
takes some time. It's why I trained in theta healing, because I believe in digging deep and getting to the root cause of these programs and then helping to release them from our bodies, our nervous system, our cells. So, to get back to the just not having limitations, recognize that someone telling you no, or someone telling you you can't do something for yourself, that's coming from their limitations. And you can choose to accept that as your own or decide, "No, I don't accept that."
Yeah, exactly. Can you talk a little bit about the theta healing? Can you just explain for my
Yeah,
listeners?
theta healing, it's got a trademark. So Vianna Stable, what she originated this, it's like I'm working with an element of meditation, light hypnosis, really not so much that, but more meditation of working with your consciousness and helping to release programs. And basically, what you're doing is, like I said, you are getting to the root cause. There are people that do this in energy healing and may not do it in the standard way of theta. Even for myself, like even though I'm certified in theta, I don't do a lot of my sessions that way, but I do utilize a lot of the things I was taught to do what also works for me. So, you could have a theta practitioner that does it right by the book. And you can even actually get the theta healing books online. You don't necessarily have to become a practitioner. So some people will dive into it that way. But it really is, kind of also, as you mentioned about Louise Hay, talking about how certain ailments are connected to emotions and, programs within. So, theta kind of expands on that even more. It's a pretty expansive program. You could be certified in many different levels of theta. I just did basic and advanced, and I just said that, okay, that's enough for me, but you could do so many. So it really just depends on, what someone feels guided toward in that.
Is it kind of like helping your client come into a deeper meditative state?
It helps, but they don't have to. It's
Oh,
more
okay.
about you as the practitioner being able to do that, and you are working with your consciousness and your client's consciousness.
Okay.
And you are taking that up beyond this plane to
Right.
release the program.
Yeah.
And some people believe that is a little too woo-woo, and others think it is the best thing ever. So I do find, people are on one side or the other on that one. And I just
Yeah.
say, to each their own, we're all on our journey for a reason. So I do appreciate the fact that it's just, I really like the teachings. I like how much information there is. And, I think I was drawn to it. So, we're always drawn to things for a reason.
Yeah. And I agree with you. People are divided on stuff like that. But I truly believe that we all have a different experience here. And what works for one person may not work for another, and that's okay. That's the beauty in having choices and having so many different type of modalities that you can lean into and find what works best for you, right?
Beautifully stated.
This is why we're individuals.
Yeah,
If talk therapy worked for everybody, we'd all be there,
I'll be
right?
doing it.
So, what was the moment that you kind of discovered through your healing that you had that gift?
Of
Being more intuitive.
It's really interesting because in hindsight, I definitely saw how I had all these abilities, but they were dormant. And it was the trauma that kept them dormant.
Yeah.
So as I was healing my trauma, healing my nervous system, healing my body, it was just this mind, body, soul healing element to myself. And it started to just kind of erupt where I started seeing things, I started hearing things. I would hear, like, people would have conversations, and I would hear their inner thoughts as well. I could start hearing people that spoke behind my back, and at the time, I was like, I always knew this intuitively. Like, I would have called myself an intuitive empath because I always had a sense, I always had a feeling. And because of the environment I was raised in, I was pretty much taught how to be able to anticipate moods and behaviors for safety. Like, is my dad going to hit today? Is he in a good mood? If he's not, like, I'm getting out, right? So anticipating these things does help develop this element of intuition. So now when it was coming from a peaceful place, it was just there and it was amazing. And I didn't even know what to do with it. And so as it started, I was just helping friends, and I was helping friends with their children because they would say, "Oh, he's saying this and he's doing that." And I would hear the child. And of course, if I was comfortable enough and the mom was willing, open to hearing such things, I would say, that's not really what he's thinking. Do you want me to share what I hear? And I would explain, this is really what he thinks, and he's not thinking what you're thinking. And as time went on, they would just come back to me like, you've changed my relationship with my child. You've helped me understand them so much. And I also found that this was just happening more and more. And then people started referring me to their friends and, oh, you need to talk to Chris. She could help you. So it was really unfolding in this organic manner. But I also don't think I was taking it very seriously because I was just like, kind of excited, like, wow, this is neat. To literally hear someone's inner thoughts. I thought that would look and feel a lot different than it actually is because it's so incredibly subtle. Um, I mean, that's ultimately what energy is. But it led me on a path, I mean, that's where I started, learning more about energy healing, learning more about the chakra system and reading them and feeling them. And, you know, it just continued to evolve. I mean, now I even help teach others because I had a client once that said, I want to do what you do. Can you teach me? And I was like, sure, I guess I could do that. Like, I never thought of it, but
Yeah.
yeah, let's do it. And, then started my first class of just spiritual development and how to help people understand themselves better.
That's awesome. And you teach classes in that?
I do. I
Yeah.
do. When they come up, I feel like I don't structure them regularly.
Hmm.
I'm more when people reach out to me, hey, when are you going to have another class?
Yeah.
Because I feel like it can be a little salesy, right? To pitch your classes. And I don't love that. I used to be in sales. And so I think because like in business, and that obviously a very different world than the spiritual world, I feel at least in many ways. And so I just, yeah, like I said, when I feel guided or someone comes to me like, hey, could you teach me? And I'm like, all right, time for another class.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. I think the more in touch you get with yourself, the more you can develop gifts like this, right?
Yeah,
Like, I think
absolutely.
I truly believe we all have that ability. It's just the level at which you're vibrating, that the level at which you're willing to look inside and go there. So call it woo all you want, but I
Yeah,
love
no,
it.
well, I have this saying, once you understand yourself is when you can go beyond yourself.
Yeah,
And it's
exactly.
incredibly powerful and healing and expansive.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, exactly. Can you explain a little bit about color
Well,
coaching?
I wouldn't necessarily do so much coaching, but because I work with chakras, I very much
Hmm.
work with those elements. But I do, as far as like color coaching, I would say I almost work with it a little bit. I mean, there's definitely more of an intricacy to it that I am not schooled in. But as far as for myself, like, let's just say someone is, struggling with their throat chakra. That
Hmm.
someone really, just from a color standpoint, should incorporate more blue in their lives. Whether it's, drinking from a blue water bottle or eating blue foods or wearing blue, these elements do enhance the energy of that
Hmm.
chakra. So I do believe in working with that. It can seem a little too simplistic for some people, but energy is so incredibly subtle
Hmm.
that it is one of the best things you could do for yourself because of the simplicity of it. Because when you work with your energy in a more subtle manner, then it is more likely to adjust and adapt to where you are hoping to shift it to. Whereas if you do something too dramatic, it is very likely to default back to the original pattern because it's like a rubber band. It's too used to
Hmm.
that pattern. So if you are just like yanking it back and then it snaps right back, right? But if you are
Hmm.
just slowly allowing for this gradual shift, and color is a very good slow shift because it's supportive and it supports the body, it works with the body. So I
Hmm.
really love working with colors in that way.
That's funny when you were talking about that and the throat chakra. I just had this memory come to me. For most of my life, I didn't feel like I had a voice to speak. And funny that I'm doing this job now, but
Yeah, that's
but
healing.
for so many years, I couldn't speak my truth, and I kept everything pushed down and hidden, and what was coming out just didn't feel authentic to me. And I detested the color blue.
Isn't that
I
interesting?
never wore blue unless it was blue jeans, but never, never near my throat. When I started healing and I started discovering why I had such pain in my throat all the time and really just speaking my voice, I obviously discovered my voice and now blue's great. I'll wear it So that's super interesting how
Well,
that
it says a
manifested
lot.
without even,
Yeah.
yeah,
Your energy would have detracted it, so you
yeah,
therefore despised it.
yeah,
And
yeah,
yeah, that's a
yeah.
perfect example
Super
of how
interesting.
subtle energy is.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Never thought about it like that until you mentioned that. For listeners who are feeling really stuck or like they can't speak their truth, what advice would you give them to start seeking help and how to change some of that?
That is always a personal journey because I feel like we're all so different, right? Finding your voice is really starting to find yourself and understand who you are. So, in some ways, it might be unpacking things of the past. In other
Hmm.
ways, it might just be doing little things for yourself today. So, anyone who's stuck from an energetic standpoint, they need movement even
Hmm.
if it's little, to get up, to go somewhere,
Hmm.
and to do little things every day. For some people, that might mean going for a run. For others, that might just mean getting out of bed. We're
Yeah.
all at different points, but stuck energy stays stuck until you move. And
Hmm.
again, sounds so simple, but for some, it can be very challenging. But you do these things for yourself and you start to make it a habit, even if it's just a little bit every day. And you allow yourself the openness to see what comes in. Because when we're on these paths and these journeys, we always have things come up, right? Like a book will suddenly come in our viewpoint at a library, right?
Hmm.
Or something pops up on social media and you feel pulled in. People find me on podcasts and they say, I completely resonated with you and your work, but I never watch podcasts and I just happen to watch that one. It's like
Yeah.
those are the things that happen to us,
Hmm.
but it comes down to that initial choice you make. So if it's just to move, to help shift that stuck energy, that's something. And
Yeah.
if you're beyond that, beyond movement, it's the self-reflection. Who am I? Who do I want to be? Have I been told I am? And start working with that. I do recommend writing because
Hmm.
whether it's writing or typing is fine, but you start to allow the subconscious to come out when you do
Hmm.
that instead of just thinking about it. When we're just thinking about it, the subconscious doesn't have the ability to come out like it does with writing. So,
Yeah.
getting the subconscious out, that's where now your higher self is starting to come in. This is who I am. And also, this is who I've been programmed to be. So now, who do I want to be knowing both these sides of me?
Yeah. Yeah. Now I notice right away if I'm in my head, if I grab a pen and put it to paper, it's that tactile movement. Instantly, my thoughts change and I'm in more of a flow state. And we have electronics now, we have phones where, oh, I'll just type it in my phone. And for me, that doesn't work. It's that tactile movement that really gets you out of your stuck place in your head and gets it flowing. If you can visualize a flow from your head through your arm and onto the paper, that helps, you
I
know?
agree.
So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I love writing.
Yeah.
Um, what is one key takeaway that you would want the listeners to know?
One key takeaway I feel that helps people on this journey is when they're looking to make change, detox is very helpful, but it's not always what people think. While it's incredibly helpful to detox the body, it's just as helpful to detox the mind. What are you exposing yourself to on a daily basis? Are you constantly on your phone, watching the news, social media, these elements of detox? Whereas connecting to nature more, connecting to, humans more on in life instead of through a device. These are incredibly helpful for you because you raise your vibration, because you are putting yourself in this human level to cleanse your body, your mind, and ultimately your spirit of these heavier energies. Because yeah, I'll just use food as an example of vibration. You go have an apple or you have a bag of chips, you're at a different vibration based on what you just ate. So being more conscious of what you're putting in your mouth, having, more fresh foods if you can, doesn't necessarily have to be like a raw diet, but, are you eating processed foods? Are you eating, a lot of contaminated foods now. You know, people are I love that a lot more of this information is coming out of how toxic the foods are. So really making these conscious choices for yourself, you know, but again, detox is a very good first step of, and what that looks for you, because detox for one is going to look different for another. And also knowing that energy is subtle. So those changes you are going to make, if you are striving for a very large goal, to really have the success to get there is the little steps over time.
Yeah. I went on a sugar detox a few weeks back, and I have terrible sweet tooth, and and it was just getting out of control. Like I eat normally really healthy, but it was slowly creeping up, and I was just feeling horrible. And honestly, it was barely a week in, and I was already noticing changes, like just this lightness, that
Yes.
energy shift, you know, and it wasn't anything that jumped out at me. It was literally just so subtle, but I started to notice it.
No, but you're right. It is so subtle, and
Yeah.
these shifts over time do that for us because that's ultimately, I would say, what allowed me to open a spirit. You know, I was really just eating clean. I don't drink. I cut out caffeine. You know, all these things that really can lower our vibration or just bring us down. As you put it, you're just suddenly lifted
Yeah.
and you're bringing yourself to these higher levels vibrationally, and then you start to then have people in your life come in that are at that level. So that's usually why on this healing journey so many people will say they're losing their friends, because your vibration is shifting and
Yeah.
theirs is not. So it doesn't mean you'll lose all your friends, but the
Yeah.
relationship will likely change.
Yeah, exactly. And you do attract new people into your
We
life,
do.
people
You
that
do.
are vibrating at that level, right? So that was something that was really big in my life when I started. I had an entire shift of the people that I surrounded myself with, right?
I agree. It was at the time I didn't know what was happening, but now I'm like, gosh, that was so exciting. Like I wish I could have embraced it with that kind of excitement because I'm like, I
Yes,
was just
yes.
blessed with these amazing people that were just so inspiring, and you know, it's just
Yeah.
yeah, it felt great. And I mean, I still have friends that I've had.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't like I just cut everybody out.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot changed. And
Yeah.
but it was just nice to see these amazing people I know in my life and continue to.
Yeah.
It's really beautiful.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that, what you said about just being more in the moment and embracing that. I didn't open myself up. And so when I started surrounding myself with people who were doing things differently and had different energy, I was like, these people are weird and fake. Like, it's such a bad judgment, but coming from the place I came from and I was so used to hiding, that just didn't feel comfortable to me. I loved it, and I felt like I was so drawn to it and I wanted more. But I really had a hard time embracing that people could literally just be happy like that. I really didn't believe it. And I thought, are these people on something?
Well, some of them are, you know, like you hear about like the mushroom therapy and
Yeah,
like what
exactly.
that does and helps them, you know, get closer to spirit. And, you know, but I agree with you. I think that's also an element of childhood trauma.
Yeah,
You know, we're not used to that kind of authentic happiness. We're used
yeah.
to more conditional elements of happiness. So even if it can feel safer, there's still going to be an aspect to us that's waiting for the other shoe to drop
Oh,
because
yes.
we're so hardwired for it. So I mean, I could even say as recent as January of this year, I went to an event and it was, you know, it was a spiritual event. It was music based, and I was in the back and I was just kind of like, you know, like I'm enjoying this, but people really got into it and they were just like, you know,
Yeah.
taking off shirts and like spinning them around and, you know, really feeling it. And I'm just like, yep, I'm not there, but
Yeah.
you do you. And I don't know if I'll ever be there. And that's okay because I know, you know, where I'm at and
Yeah.
I'm good with it. So I think
Yeah.
that's the main thing is we can look at these things and be like, okay, not for me really, but that's
Hmm.
also okay. We're not coming at this place of like there's something wrong with ourselves or others.
Yeah.
We're just recognizing the difference in an observational way. And it's like, okay,
Yeah.
carry
I
on.
love that. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's so true. It's so true. I've been in rooms like that too, although people weren't taking their shirts off, but they were getting really, really into the energy of it.
Yeah.
And I was holding back a bit. I was feeling it, just not in the same way. And that's okay.
Yeah.
It's
Likewise. Yeah.
when you're embracing a new lifestyle or you're leaning into different energies and healing, you just have to be okay with where you're at. Be okay that it's a slow process for you and you don't have to rush it. You don't have to be where someone else is. I think the comparison thief is something you have to watch out for and be aware of.
Yeah, I like how you say that too. The comparison thief robs you of joy, robs you of
Yeah.
peace,
Yeah. And
robs you
sometimes,
of a lot.
yeah, and sometimes it's subtle. So
Yeah.
what have you got going on, Chris, that you want to share with us? Anything coming up?
So right now I've been doing an abundance series where it's a 3-month process
Okay.
of helping people better connect to abundance
Mm-hmm.
with everything becoming so volatile. A lot of people were getting scared. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
people were worried about, especially their finances. And I really wanted to help people connect to the idea of abundance.
Mm-hmm.
And I did a trial run uh, at the end of last year. And the reason why I chose 3 months is because when it comes to seeing the actual shifts in energy, we usually see that in 3-month increments. Healing tends to take place in forms of three. So,
Okay.
like if you do like any kind of cleanse, often cleanses
Mm-hmm.
are 9 days because those 333, your body is doing different things on those 3 days. So I was kind of just felt aligned to that. So I did the trial run the end of last year, and I got such a great response to it. It sold out. So I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to do that
Good for
again because a
you.
lot of people wanted to continue and, more people joined. So this one's almost sold out again. So I probably will continue to do it as much as people want it. I think that's just kind
Mm-hmm.
of how my work tends to go. I'm always doing new and different things just based on what people want,
Yeah.
or just how I feel I'm being guided.
Nice. And that's on your website?
It's on my website, yeah.
Okay, awesome. So I will post that in the show notes for you. And
Thank
is
you.
there anything else that you want to talk about before we wrap up?
Thank you for this. I understand just through connecting with you, we probably have a lot in common.
Yeah.
And I love how the universe brings people together, which also means we're very likely to draw in people that are meant to
Yes.
see this and relate to what it is to be raised in a traumatic environment,
Mm-hmm.
to overcome trauma, to really come into these better versions of ourselves. So,
Yeah.
I just really wanted to point that out. I appreciate that.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. I love how spaces like this enable us to come together and share what we have. And it's not always the most fun to talk about, but there's great things on the other side. And so to be able to share that with people and know that, to have hope and faith that you're on the right track. If you're listening, you're already one step ahead.
Yes, I
So
love that
that's
you
important.
said there's great things on the other side because
Yeah,
usually
exactly.
this journey starts with a leap of faith
Yeah.
and we don't know what's on the other side and it's terrifying and why so many people don't make those hard choices.
Yeah.
But to know the ones that have been through it and have gotten on the other side and we could say it's so amazing on the other side and I'm so
It
grateful I
is.
did it and my only regret is not doing it sooner.
Yeah, me too. 100%. I
Changed
couldn't
my
agree
life.
more. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me today on another episode of Becoming Sound. If this episode resonated with you in some way, please share it with someone you care about. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button. It helps to get this information out to more people who may need it. If you have a sec, I would love a follow on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. While you're there, hit the 5-star rating and give me a review. When you're scrolling, follow me on my social platforms and I would love to hear your comments and feedback. Have a fabulous day, lots of love and gratitude from me. Please note, the views, information, and opinions expressed during the Becoming Sound podcast series are solely those of the individuals involved. The content of this podcast is to educate, inform, and for entertainment purposes only. This podcast series and the content presented does not constitute for medical or other professional advice or services. If you are in crisis or in need of help, please contact your medical or professional provider.